RoH Part 2, Scene 12. Day 3, Madness. Mid-morning of the next day. The morning was sunny, but cold enough to make the assistant shiver through her wool-lined blue suit jacket. Her new high-heeled shoes click-clacked on the sidewalk at a nice ordered pace as she carried groceries back towards the agency's safe house. She had their favourite coffee, some of those sweet macaroons that Zay liked so much, a few snacks for the day, and the makings of a curry and noodle dinner. Who's the best assistant ever? Me. Brushing the lines of her suit, she mentally and physically preened herself. Behind her, there was a click like that of a weapons safety coming off, and a hand dropped onto her shoulder. The nice, comforting click-click pattern of her new shoes halted abruptly. A harsh voice spoke. You may be the best assistant, but you're not a very good agent. Trembling, she tried very hard not to drop the groceries. Turn around, he barked. The man behind her was tall, fairly attractive, and his eyes were so light brown that they bordered on yellow. He wore a ratty leather jacket over several layers of rags and battered jeans. In one hand he held a weapon that was aimed at her middle. The assistant swallowed. You're a rebel, aren't you? Her voice quivered a little, but she got the words out without stammering. We're not after you, so if you do exactly as you're told, we won't, and don't make trouble, you'll be able to eat that curry noodle dinner you have there. Got it? The assistant nodded slowly. Come with me. Scene break. Lunchtime. Agent Garn, the computer talent, was tired and hungry. The poky little granny unit Zay'd been given from which to do their work was out of coffee, and unless Zay liked hot sauce on stale crackers, it was out of food as well. But there wasn't time between tasks to go out for supplies, and their softened assistant had gone poof early that morning and never returned. Their fingers flitted over the keyboard and Zay sighed. This job is for monkeys. The job was simple. The surveillance hub received messages from the tower, which were decoded, stripped of their identifiers, recoded, and sent off to their recipients, who were active agents and spies undercover around Aram City. If Zay'd had a break, even just a day's break, Zay could have hacked out a small, efficient program to do much of the hard work for them. But of course, Zay hadn't had a day off in a long time. Unfortunately, their next day off would be a rest between job transfers, and because they never knew what Zay was going to do next, there was no way of taking the time to make their job easier and more efficient. Zay sighed again. In their opinion, the agency was too inefficient with its use of valuable resources. Zay, of course, being one of those valuable resources. A priority message alarm jingled and another window opened up on top of the work Zay was doing. It was a message from the spy in the primary rebel cell. Main hub, you've been made. Get out now. Panic leaped through their body. Nooth! Tapping through 20 or so backed up job windows, Zay got to the base communication hub command line. What code is it? Nooth, what code? Their fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, the panic blanking their normally brilliant mind for a second. Code 6. Their fingers shot across the keys. Sothan Nooth! Launching from their chair, they reached around the room, searched around the room for their weapon and ID. They, with their suit jacket, were on the bed in the other corner of the sitting room. They scampered over, picked them up, and threw the jacket over their shoulders. In front of the north-facing windows, the laptop jingled with another message alert, and they paced back to it. On the screen, blinking in big red lettering, was Asset A2.0248, codename Cheetah, inbound. Agent Garn sensed danger at that moment and stopped to listen. So it wasn't a particularly gifted Psy. In fact, at a level 1 telepath rating, their danger sense and computer talents were far more useful resources for the agency. Their danger sense was always spot on, and it was burning loudly in their head. The danger came from all around them, the front and back doors, as well as the large north side windows in front of them. The south, however, felt a little less dangerous. Running, they shot through the narrow central hall and zigged into a dinky little bathroom. The window was tiny and they wasn't sure if they'd fit through it, but they had to try because the sense of danger was intensifying. They got up onto the edge of the converted bath and pushed their shoulders through the window. It was tight, but they could move a little bit by wiggling further and further out. But when they got to their butt, it wouldn't budge. Crash sounded from inside, and they heard broken glass and yelling. Wiggling themselves, they kept struggling. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Then finally, their rear pushed through the gap, and they slipped out of the window. They dropped for what felt like forever before landing on a pile of grass clippings. Garn lay there for a few moments, listening for any nearby threats and calming the panic in them. Once calm enough to think again, they set about vaulting over the low back fence to safety. Only as they ran down the narrow street on the other side of the fence did they realise they'd left the laptop behind. A laptop that had all the codes and system access the rebels would need if they wanted to take down the agency's external communication network, or the tools with which to find any of the spies in their ranks. They swore obscenely. Scene 13. Asha skimmed through the bookcase, which sat in one corner of the granny unit, for any useful information. She found only coding manuals and a variety of romantic fiction. The spy in their ranks, the one responsible for the loss of Terra and Talon's cells, had given the hub agent a heads up. The fact that the spy had known where they were going to attack with enough time to warn the hub worried Asha. It meant that the spy was definitely one of those in Nama's cell. More specifically, one of the half who were helping on this particular job. There were still 10 or so suspects left to check out, but she and Hawk were slowly closing in on them. The spy would pay for the damage they'd done. Asha would personally see to it. Making her way carefully through the shattered glass on the carpet, she glanced around her for any other useful information the computer talent might have left in his rush to escape. They deliberately isolated the assistant and raided the place from all angles so they could take the operator as well as the hub. Without a high-rating computer talent, they would need to acquire another to hack into the hub. She was sure another computer talent would become available soon enough. Hawk often unintentionally worked that way with the timing of his escapes. And as irritating as it was for her on a personal level, it was very helpful for the rebels. Reaching the desk in the middle of the room, Asha pulled out a wheeled office chair and sat down. When she cleared the screensaver with a mouse click, she saw one message window on top of all of the others. Big red flashing letters declared that an alarm had been tripped and Cheetah, the new and dangerous assassin, was headed their way. "Hide Chenna," she whispered as she lifted the radio from her belt. "Evac, I repeat, evac. Team 1 and 2 drop everything and get to the periphery, over." Unplugging the cables to the sounds of footsteps rushing outside, she shoved the laptop under one arm and turned to leave. 2 paces from the door, a distinctive sense of overwhelming danger made her skip sideways for cover. A gunshot fired as she moved. Ducking behind a small couch, she landed on all fours. Bits of plaster and dust fluttered into her hair from the new bullet hole in the wall. She needed backup and went for the radio, but it wasn't on her belt. Searching around her, she looked out across the floor to see that it sat in the doorway and was too far out of cover for her to grab. Being an agency building, the unit was psi-shielded, which meant she had no way to call for help. "Haida," she swore mentally. Someone leaped through the smashed sitting room windows, and 2 feet landed inside with a thud. It had to be the girl. Asha knew she could probably take her out by herself. After all, that's what she was trained for. But there had to be something for the others to find if she failed. Carefully, Asha tucked the laptop into the gap under the bookcase behind her. The assassin girl was almost invisible, both empathically and telepathically, but her movement wasn't invisible telekinetically. Asha could sense the location of stationary and moving objects, as well as what things could be moved, so the girl's slow, almost silent steps across the room created a bright shimmer in her telekinetic senses. The girl walked towards the couch. Asha, icy calm, simply waited for her to get near enough. When a shoe crunched broken glass very close, Usher knew it was time to fight. She gripped the two-seater with her mind, kinetically picked it up, and threw it as hard as she could at the assassin's slim form. But the dark-haired girl flipped backwards out of the way and missed being taken out by the couch and the wave of kinetic thrust by only a hair's breadth. Usher let go of the couch, which continued to fly across the room and crashed through the other wall into the kitchen beyond. She aimed her gun at the girl and ran sideways. As she fired, she kinetically gripped a bed in the corner and lifted it clean off the floor. The girl landed from her black backflip low to the ground. She slid on her knees across the glass-covered floor and underneath the now flying bed, before sliding through the doorway into the hall out of sight. A line of bullet holes in the wall traced the girl's trajectory, but none hit their target. The bed smashed through one side of the doorframe and out into the hall. Usher ducked through the couch-shaped hole into the tiny kitchen and pulled open an old metal fridge door to use as cover. The girl stepped back into the sitting room with her gun up, and for the first time Usher caught sight of the green eyes her brother had talked about. In the millisecond they stared at each other over their weapons, Usher sensed a heart that had long ago completely disconnected and iced over. So young and already broken by the agency, she thought. She felt a spark of pity for the girl. Must be a terrible thing to be forced to kill even before the age of consent. However, Usher's compassion was cut off abruptly by the sharp and forceful mental thrust of the girl trying to telepathically gain control. Usher called out defiantly against the attack. They both pulled their triggers at the same time. Usher felt the bullet impact her stomach, and as she hit the lino, she heard the girl fall as well. Ha! She thought defiantly. The pain was pretty bad, but she had to move. Panting, she got up from the kitchen floor. Putting one hand firmly to her stomach, she lifted her weapon with the other. Stepping through the mess of wrecked hall, she assessed the damage at the living room. Blood was splattered on the floor, showing where the girl had fallen, but there was no body. More specks of blood led towards the broken north windows and outside. She's gone. Usher was oddly relieved that it was over, even if she hadn't managed to kill the assassin. Shifting through the lounge and into the wrecked hall, she forced her slowly numbing limbs to obey her. Just a little further and she'd be able to call for help. The entrance door was open and she fell to her knees in front of it. Outside, Nama and her brother ran down the concrete path towards her, and she reached for their minds. Get Ren. Scene 14. Usher, Talon yelled as he ran up the steps towards her. Blood stained her hands and stomach, and she looked so pale. He got to her before Nama. The moment he touched her, the sharp, spiking agony flowed into him, and he cried out. Don't, Tay, she said breathlessly. He ignored her warning and grabbed her free arm to help her, gritting his teeth as he did so. Lay back, Usher. Coming up from behind him, Nama physically pushed Tay out of the way and forced him to let go of Usher again. Kneeling down next to her, Nama put his hands over her stomach wound, and she gasped as he applied pressure. Talon leaned around Nama and grabbed her for her fingers. Her skin was oddly cold. She gripped his hand tightly for a moment and let go of him again. Get back, Tay. Please. Don't speak, Usher. Nama interrupted her. Just stay with us. Rana's almost here. Cheetah, she got away. Get the laptop. She let out a terrible groan of agonized pain, and Tay put a hand to his face to suppress his fear and grief. She opened a broad mental channel that any telepath in their vicinity could hear. Get the laptop. Hawk needs it for his plans. It's under the bookcase in the sitting room. Footsteps approached, and Tay glanced at the doorway to see Ren running towards them. Ren's here, Tay said. Don't worry about the laptop. I'll get it. He backed into the sitting room to allow Ren inside and turned to look around. The place was a total mess. He stepped over the remains of a bed that was half in the hallway and half in the sitting room. A hole in the west wall led into a kitchen beyond, with a couch smashed against the line of a countertop and cupboards. In the sitting room itself, the windows in front of him had been shattered inwards, opening the room to the midday air through shreds of net curtain. A line of blood led crossed the shard-covered carpet and out through the open window frame. To his right, in the far corner, stood a waist-high bookcase filled with technical-looking manuals and the occasional intact pot plant. Approaching it, Talon got to his hands and knees, shoved a finger into the gap underneath. His finger hit a metal surface and he jimmied the modern-looking laptop out of the gap. Its cover was made of shiny metal, size of a sheet of printer paper, and only barely thicker than his finger. It was bizarre to think that such a thin piece of metal could house a full digital communication hub with remote satellite access. With it in his arms, Talon stepped back out into the hall. Usha was unconscious, but breathing steadily. A wrecked bullet sat on the ground next to her, covered in blood. He handed the laptop to Nama and stared down at his sister. He couldn't have faced losing her too. She was all that was left of his old life and their parents. He knelt down and brushed some of her dark hair from her face. Cheetah had nearly killed her. That girl had already killed so many people. Old Brown, the twins, Haran, strong, loving Hetera. He felt a flicker of rage come to life inside him. That assassin girl. He gritted his teeth. The rage flared up and he pulled his mouth into a hate-filled grimace. He got to his feet again. There was a blood trail leading out of the sitting room, a trail that led to a girl who could kill without mercy. She's not going to get away with this again, he snarled. Nama frowned at him. What? Tay turned away from him into the sitting room. He pulled out his gun and approached the gaping hole that had once been a large floor-to-ceiling window. Jumping out and landing on the grass below, he looked around the side yard. The sun was warm despite the season being early winter. There was nothing in the yard other than well-tended grass and a white picket fence that seemed to surround the property on all sides. To his left was a garden gate. It was half open and smudged with a blood-caked handprint. Glowering at the long-fingered print, he stepped towards it. Talon, come back. Nama stood in the broken window above him. What the nooth are you doing? Going after that Southern girl, he snapped back. Your sister was A0 trained and she nearly didn't survive. What chance would you have? She's injured, he growled over his shoulder. Shouldn't be too hard to kill her now. Tay stepped through the gate and out into a narrow driveway that accessed the backs of surrounding houses. Wait, Talon, this is madness. You're going to get yourself killed. Nama called out behind him. Haidar, at least wait for me.